wonder where you were going. Mulholland Drive.
Over 20 years since its initial release, and the mystery of Mulholland Drive still endures.
Why elaborate on that?
No, I won't.
David Lynch has always declined to comment on the exact meaning of his films, and due to their surrealist and abstract nature, it can be somewhat difficult to figure them out. However, I think this is a great thing as it allows the audience to act as detectives and form their own thoughts and opinions. So what exactly happened in Mulholland Drive, and what does it all mean?
It makes me dream, and so I hated to say goodbye to that, but it was built primarily for a pilot, and a pilot has openings, but very few closings. So that was the trick.
Mulholland Drive originally being planned as a TV pilot goes a long way in explaining the film's structure. As a rough guideline, the entire section up until the opening of the blue box served as the TV pilot, while everything after that was added to make it into a feature film.
Get out of the car.
There are certain plot lines within the pilot portion of the film that are never elaborated on, such as why Rita is being hunted, but these sequences within the film do not detract from the whole, and can still be interpreted and understood.
In LA, Mulholland Drive is a famous road, and there's much mood. There's so many stories about that road, and it's a very kind of dreamy thing to think about.
The film up until the blue box is opened is a dream. This is clearly indicated right at the start of the film as the camera slowly moves towards a pillow. The red bedding and green sheet initially shown are also seen when Diane wakes up to reality later in the film. So this outlines the two-part structure of Mulholland Drive, but there is one key scene that occurs early on that we need to look at. Lynch cleverly even shows a set of keys on the table before heading into it.
I had a dream about this place.
Oh boy.
See what I mean?
The diner scene is a microcosm of the entire film and serves as an explanation of the entire plot. Dan explains that he has had two identical dreams of being at this Winkies. On both of these occasions it was half night, but it looks exactly like this. He is scared, but he realises there's a man in the back of this place. He's the one who's doing it, and he can see him through the wall. There is some very important context surrounding this scene. Firstly, the scene is bookended by Rita as she sleeps. This implies that this dream at Winkies is Rita's dream, and it is also fair to assume that Dan represents Rita in it. Also of note about this scene is that Betty is yet to be introduced within the dream, and we have only seen the image of her engulfed in light within the opening few minutes. So how is Rita able to dream within a dream, and who exactly is the person behind Winkies controlling everything?
Does duality play a lot in your work?
Well, yeah, duality, yeah. Yeah.
To state the obvious, duality is an essential part of David Lynch's films. This can be between reality and fiction, blonde and brunette, good and evil, etc. Specifically looking at David Lynch's LA trilogy, there is a clear emphasis on duality in regards to identity. Whether it's Renee and Alice in Lost Highway, or Nikki and Susan in Inland Empire, singular characters occupy multiple identities and names. Mulholland Drive explores exactly the same theme with Diane and Betty, as well as Rita and Camilla, for example. Within the unconscious mind of Diane are all of her thoughts, memories and feelings that are traumatic. I mentioned that it is implied that Rita dreamed within the mind of Diane, and throughout Mulholland Drive she is the only person within the dream world that we see fall asleep twice, or fall asleep at all for that matter, excluding Betty briefly at the end of the dream. Rita and Betty are two sides of the same person, two sides of Diane. From the film's very first line of dialogue,
What are you doing?
What are you doing? We don't stop here.
We don't stop here.
to her being in possession of the money in the blue key, the same way Diane was at Winky's. Also at Winky's she sees the waitress's name tag of Diane, where Diane in the real world sees the name tag of Betty. I think the most critical scene, however, is when Betty and Rita make a joint phone call to Diane Selwyn within the dream.
Strange to be calling yourself. Maybe it's not me.
Let us further analyse the character of Rita. After the car accident, Rita walks down the hill to LA like a broken doll. She is an amnesiac and takes refuge at Aunt Ruth's where she meets Betty. As she has forgotten who she is, she adopts the name Rita from a poster for the 1946 film Gilda. Although Rita takes the name of a femme fatale type character, she never poses any risk to Betty. In fact, it is Betty who poses the danger to Rita, with her continually pushing Rita to try to find out who she is and placing her in distressing situations. While on the surface Betty seems like an idealistic version of Diane, I believe she is more complex than that. The very first scene of the film shows the jitterbug contest that Diane refers to at the dinner party.
I won this jitterbug contest. That sort of led to acting.
This is an interesting scene for a few different reasons. On your first watch of Mulholland Drive it won't make any sense, but more importantly it shows Betty alongside Irene and her companion, whom she arrived in LA with in the dream world. We do not see her dancing, and we do not see her partner. With the appearance of Betty engulfed in light, I don't believe this jitterbug contest ever took place. It is a complete fabrication, and it is the persona of Betty and not Diane that enters the dream world. The key scene that made this apparent to me is the audition scene. The director of this project is Bob Brooker, who in reality directed the Sylvia North story where Diane met Camilla. Within the dream world, Bob has been turned into an individual who seems to mumble complete nonsense, and his peers hold little respect for him. But if we take what Bob says to Betty and repurpose it for the jitterbug scene, I believe it makes perfect sense. No, it's not a contest. The two of them with themselves.
So, don't play it for real until it gets real.
If we take this audition as a memory, it shows that Diane was in a relationship with her dad's best friend when she was underage, and that if it was discovered he would go to jail. It is incredibly traumatic, and within this dream world it is the closest we come to reality.
It is both.
And in working on it, found out there is a medical name for this thing, psychogenic fugue, where the mind tricks itself and you can either take on another identity or you do what you have to do to hide those things from yourself.
For anyone who is familiar with Lynch as an individual, it is incredibly clear that he is obsessed with the human mind, and he explores it in many different ways within his work. If Lost Highway is, as David said, an exploration of the mental condition known as psychogenic fugue, I believe Mulholland Drive to be an exploration of dissociative identity disorder, or as it's sometimes called, split personality, with both Rita and Betty serving as two distinct individual personalities within Diane. Going back to the opening scene on Mulholland Drive, there are two cars joyriding side by side, a visual metaphor for the two personalities. One of the cars crashes into the limo, while the other car keeps on driving. This marks the point that the personalities switched within Diane from that of Rita to that of Betty. While you could look at the car accident causing Rita's amnesia, I believe it is instead due to the fact that Betty is now in control and therefore Rita is unaware of what is taking place. She is afraid of the light, whereas Betty relishes in it. Mulholland Drive marks such a huge turning point in the life of Diane and the relationship she has with Camilla, so it makes a lot of sense that this would be the point where the personality of Betty emerges. Dissociative identity disorder emerges as a result of some form of overwhelming event or trauma. An alternate personality is created as a defense mechanism to prevent you from having to deal directly with the trauma. If we refer back to the audition once again, it was this traumatic event within Diane's life that initially created the persona of Betty, to shield her from the abuse of her childhood. When Betty is reading the scene with Rita, she severely downplays the severity of it, once again as a way of shielding her from this memory.
Such a lame scene. But you are really good.
Then there is this strong reaction from Rita.
Dream place. Well, you can imagine how I feel.
And this line of dialogue.
Come on, it'll be just like in the movies. We'll pretend to be someone else.
And then there is this visual technique, which is a direct reference to 1966's Persona, a film that served as a huge thematic inspiration for Mulholland Drive. Betty ultimately re-emerges as a reaction to Adam and Camilla's engagement, a significant emotional trauma that occurs in her life. It is no coincidence that when Diane is hiring the hitman, this is where we see the name tag for Betty. The dissolve to the back of Winky's shows who exactly is in control at this point, and proves that Betty is and has become a monster. Hollywood and its workings are portrayed in a very sinister way within Mulholland Drive, which given Lynch's experience with the studio system comes as no real surprise. Following his initial success with The Elephant Man, Lynch signed on to direct Dune, a film that he didn't have final cut or control over and regrets making more than any other.
On Dune, I started selling out even in the script phase, knowing I didn't have final cut, and I sold out. So it was a slow dying the death and a terrible, terrible experience.
On Twin Peaks, ABC executives insisted that Lynch and fellow Twin Peaks creator Mark Frost reveal Laura Palmer's killer's identity prematurely. Lynch reluctantly agreed, but has since called the decision one of his biggest professional regrets. Then there is the situation with Mulholland Drive, where Lynch once again ran into problems within the studio system.
And the executive in charge watched this pilot at 6 o'clock in the morning, standing up on the phone, drinking coffee with the thing on a TV across the room, and he didn't like it. So,
on the phone?
Making phone calls, you know, like an executives they do. So,
Lynch's own frustrations working within the studio system certainly echo in the character of Adam. While Adam is a brilliant director,
Who's a head above the rest.
He is put in a completely powerless position within the Hollywood studio system. Adam first appears in Mulholland Drive during his meeting with the Castigliani brothers, who make it clear to Adam the girl that he will cast for the Sylvia North story.
No way! That girl is in my movie!
While completely satirical in nature, it's quite easy for me to imagine Lynch having similar encounters with this type of person over the course of his career. As an artist, Adam does not wish to compromise the integrity of his film, so he declines their recommendation of whom he should cast. Of important note here is that the name of the girl is Camilla Rhodes, which is of course the name of Laura Harring's character in the real world. Adam would pay dearly for declining the recommendation, and in retaliation his film is shut down, his finances are stopped, and to top it all off his wife is having an affair.
Now you've done it.
Ironically, Adam's wife blames him for discovering the affair, as he shouldn't have been at the house at that time. He is a director with no control, neither over his films or his life. Adam's arc concludes when he concedes and picks the girl named Camilla. However, the girl he was really interested in was Betty, but due to the conspiracy and Betty leaving prematurely, they never got the opportunity to meet one another. Overall, it is easy to see that within Betty's dream world, her desire is to see Adam face significant difficulties given that she blames Adam for taking Camilla from her. even though in reality Diane's and Camilla's relationship was always one-sided. Going back to the dinner party in the real world, Adam makes a toast with Camilla.
Here's to love.
Both individuals are present within the frame when this line of dialogue is spoken. However, when Diane gives the toast to Camilla, she delivers the line while being the only individual in the shot, before we see Camilla's reaction.
Here's to love.
Subtle creative decisions like these really add to the depth of the film.
Beautiful evening.
Yeah.
Among the individuals Adam encounters, the cowboy is by far the most enigmatic. When you think about cowboys, what is the first thing you think of? For me, it's moments like these. Gunslingers are a staple character type within old Hollywood westerns, and the cowboy within Mulholland Drive exudes a similar aura. He is a hired gun of the Castigliani brothers, who makes it clear to Adam that if he wants to live the good life, then he will choose the girl. What's especially interesting about the cowboy is that he seems to transcend the limitations of the dream. When he first meets Adam, the light flickers strongly and he gives Adam the message: "You'll see me one more time if you do good.
You'll see me 2 more times if you do bad."
This message is not for Adam, but instead for Diane. From this point in the film we do see the cowboy 2 more times, once when he wakes Diane up, and the second time at the dinner party where he walks by the girl who kissed Camilla. Overall, I believe the cowboy represents the enforcement of evil within Hollywood, the dream, and the real world.
A man's attitude goes some ways, the way his life will be.
Film is a language. It speaks to people, but not always with words and solely with the intellect. So it takes not an effort, but a certain attitude to see certain films that have these abstractions or things that are not so normal, but they're very easily understood if you think and feel and arrive at your own conclusion.
The studio system acts as the hierarchy for the dream world. Mr. Roke is searching for Rita for a reason that is never explained. However, what we do see is when the dream mafia is calling around, they call Betty with her distinctive red lampshade, black phone, and cigarette butts. We did not know this initially, but this is the very first time reality creeps into the dream world. Within the course of the film, we never see Betty smoke, and this is the closest gesture we see to smoking. The film's silliest moment comes when the hitman makes a real mess of his job. He manages to retrieve Ed's black book, but only after killing 2 extra individuals and setting off the fire alarm. Perhaps this moment is Betty's hope that the hitman failed the hit on Camilla in some way, that she may still be alive. Or perhaps this is just a plotline that would have made more sense and been expanded on if Mulholland Drive got the green light as a TV show. Another important scene is when Louise Bonner knocks at the door.
My name's Betty.
No, it's not. That's not what she said.
This is the only scene Louise appears in, but she has a destabilising effect on Betty and her dream world. Who Louise is never explained beyond her being a tenant who knows Aunt Ruth. I'll just throw out the theory that I believe Louise may be the real-life landlord of Diane. She tries to evict someone out of her home within the dream, and Louise's presence may explain why Diane changed apartments in the real world.
That one is in my room and she won't leave. I want you to get her out. I want you to get her out now.
At the Sierra Bonita apartments, both Rita and Betty evade the eyes of the detectives. The woman who Diane swapped apartments with eyes Rita intently, which is a stark contrast from other interactions within the dream world, where Betty was always the centre of attention. While Rita is happy to leave, Betty is persistent in accessing number 17 where Diane is residing.
What are you doing? Come on, help me in.
Upon their entry, they are overwhelmed by a smell, and Betty leads Rita to Diane's corpse. Rita reacts much more violently than Betty does, whose reaction is somewhat muted. To me, the corpse represents Rita's greatest fear of being abandoned, left to decay and being entirely forgotten by the world. Upon seeing this, she cuts her hair and seeks to change her appearance. Her image mirrors Betty, and this marks the point where two distinct personalities begin merging to become one. Betty's actions towards her altar were only ever out of love, and to protect her true self from the trauma she suffered. Knowing this makes the events of the real world even more tragic.
Film is so much like music. So much of it is feeling. And if the mind gets engaged, there's a thing called intuition, where you feel and think to arrive at an inner knowing.
After waking up, Betty and Rita head for a taxi. The lamppost has a poster attached to it that reads "Hollywood is hell," and a blurred effect is used for the first time. We see a similar effect used both as Betty with herself and when she is at the dinner party. These blurs definitely indicate a passage of time, but I believe they also represent the increasingly blurred lines between the dream world and reality.
No hay banda. There is no band.
The magician's monologue can be interpreted in several different ways. Firstly, it confirms that yes, this world we have inhabited for the entire film up until this point is in fact an illusion. It is also a clever play on the incredible nature of cinema and its ability to manipulate sound and imagery. I would also like to raise another idea. The individual who delivers the film's final Silencio sits above the magician when he summons lightning. This sound affects Betty in a profound way, causing her to shake in fear. This same visual motif can also be found in the real world, as Betty stares blankly at the blue key. Betty is no longer in control and she has lost her power over the dream and over Diane. The reason she shakes is because she has been directly confronted and outed for who she is. Rebecca Del Rio comes on stage and performs the Spanish version of the song Crying. I will spare you the pain of reading all of the lyrics in English, but they're all quite self-explanatory within the context of the story. In an exquisite use of sound, Rebecca collapses but the song continues to play. How do you react to this? Such a beautiful song mixed with such a horrific sight. Both Rita and Betty return to Aunt Ruth's where Betty disappears and leaves Rita all alone. This is one of the most critical scenes of the film, the collapse of the dream world. When Rita opens the box, she finally learns the truth. She finally accepts the trauma that Betty has been shielding from her, and she learns about what Betty has done in her absence. When the cowboy wakes Diane up, Rita is shown first, and then it switches to Betty's corpse, reiterating that it is in fact the personality of Rita that is returning to the real world. Irene and presumably her husband appear 3 times in Mulholland Drive. Firstly alongside Betty coveted in light, secondly when Betty arrives in LA, and thirdly at Diane's apartment. Irene and her husband are very encouraging and supportive of Betty.
Remember, I'll be watching for you on the big screen.
Okay, Irene. Won't that be the day?
I believe encouragement is what they symbolise, and specifically towards Betty. What makes them uncanny is that they are so one-dimensional as characters. Betty sees them only as a sign of encouragement, so even when they leave her side, they continue smiling. There is also a duality to encouragement, as it is entirely dependent on what or who is being encouraged. The acts that Betty committed is something that Diane cannot live with, and they appear from the blue box as remnants of Betty's monstrosity. Their continued and relentless encouragement within her apartment overwhelms Diane to the point of self-destruction.
How interested are you in logic in any traditional sense? Because some of the films do.
No, all of them have a logic. I'm very interested in logic.
Okay, so to recap everything chronologically. Diane moves to LA after the death of her aunt in an attempt to become an actress. She auditions for the Sylvia North story, which is a role she really wanted, but ultimately loses out to Camilla. The Sylvia North story is where the pair originally met, and from there they became friends and from Diane's perspective engaged in a relationship. Camilla would help Diane get roles, but the nature of their relationship changed upon Camilla meeting Adam, the man she would eventually plan to marry. Due to the trauma of the engagement, Betty, who is a distinct personality within Diane, re-emerges. Diane does not have control over her alter Betty. Her personality is completely different and she acts to try and protect Diane from this trauma. She orders the hit and then receives the blue key as proof that the job has been completed. Upon receiving the key, she goes to sleep as Betty and we enter the dream world. Events unfold and Betty slowly loses control over Diane and the dream. This was not supposed to happen, and Rita, who is Diane's true self, opens the blue box where she learns the full truth and what Betty has done in her absence. She is consumed by grief and loss, as this is not what she wanted. She loved Camilla and she cannot come to terms with what she has done. This is also one of the reasons she never reciprocated Betty's love within the dream. She stares blankly at the blue key before there is a knock at the door, from whom we don't know but are most likely the detectives. Irene and her husband enter Diane's apartment. Their presence overwhelms Diane and she tragically meets her end. Both Rita and Betty, one potential star lost amongst the lights of Hollywood. When put linearly, the plot is actually quite simple, but how exactly do the narrative threads connect and what does it all mean? It's something I've thought about for a long time, until suddenly it hit me. Control is an illusion.
It's all recorded.
We have far less control over events and situations than we care to believe.
It is all a tape.
I think the tragedy of Mulholland Drive is Diane's lack of control, which is not her fault. She could not control her career in Hollywood or her relationship with Camilla. Opposed to leaving as she did when she was a child, Betty instead decided to take action. She tried to assert more control, but the more she tried to control her situation, the more everything eluded her, leading to Camilla's and Diane's eventual destruction.
That's the big lesson. Don't make a film if it can't be the film you want to make. It's a joke, and a sick joke, and it'll kill you.